Camille Hayes awoke to an unusually bright morning, a day that promised both the comfort of routine and the thrill of subtle possibilities. The city around her buzzed gently with life, the soft hum of traffic and the distant laughter of children in nearby parks forming an urban symphony that signified normalcy. For Camille, each day was a carefully crafted canvas painted with hopes, dreams, and the quiet ambition of living freely. Yet, as the sun cast golden hues over the neighborhood, no one could have predicted that this seemingly ordinary afternoon would soon evolve into a turning point that would challenge every fiber of her being. As she stepped out of her modest apartment, Camille felt a familiar warmth on her skin, a refreshing reminder of how the world always had something kind to offer if one was willing to embrace it. Dressed in her favorite comfortable attire, she walked down the tree-lined streets with an air of quiet confidence. With each step, Camille's mind wandered freely through the myriad possibilities of the day ahead, meeting an old friend for coffee, perhaps visiting a local art exhibit, or simply strolling through the market to appreciate the small beauties of city life. Little did she know, her journey that day would be abruptly interrupted by a force that sought to shatter that very freedom. The neighborhood was typically a tableau of diversity and vibrant culture, where people of all walks of life mingled and exchanged smiles. Camille's route took her past murals and bustling storefronts that echoed the creativity and resilience of the community. As she walked with a gentle purpose, it seemed as though every person she passed held a silent understanding of the beauty in everyday moments. Yet, the serenity of this routine was vulnerable to the harsh shadows of prejudice that, unbeknownst to her, loomed near. Out of the corner of her eye, Camille noticed an unusual commotion on a quiet street corner. A cluster of individuals in uniform had congregated near a small park, their eyes scanning the passers-by with a focus that felt unnervingly intense. There was an unsettling energy in the air, a predatory precision that starkly contrasted with the otherwise carefree ambience of the afternoon. Camille's heart began to beat a little faster, not out of fear for something immediate but because her instincts warned her that something was amiss. Before she could process her mounting intuition, a firm hand gripped her arm. In that split second, the world around her slowed down, the sound of murmurs, the rustling of leaves, and even her own rapid heartbeat seemed amplified. A commanding voice, cold and devoid of any warmth, demanded that she stop. The officer's eyes held an unsettling mix of suspicion and authority. In a desperate, confused moment, Camille realized that she was about to be accused of something she had done nothing to warrant, an accusation based solely on her appearance and the simple act of walking. The words, "walking while black," resonated in her ears, a cruel reminder of the systemic bias that had silently eroded the fabric of the community she loved. The phrase, heavy with historical injustice, seemed to hang in the air like a noose. Camille had always believed that the world was evolving, that progress was inevitable, but the shock of that day made her question everything she thought she knew about freedom and dignity. In that moment, her identity, her right to move without hindrance, was under siege. Her initial shock was quickly replaced by a profound sense of betrayal and determination. How could it be that in a society that claimed progress and equality, an innocent walk could lead to such an indignity? Tears welled in her eyes, not merely out of sadness, but out of a burning need to be seen for who she truly was, beyond the shallow judgments of a prejudiced system. As the officers firmly led her away from the spot, the serene afternoon turned into a surreal sequence of flashing lights, muffled voices, and the stark realization that her life, for a brief moment, had been hijacked by injustice. Inside the back seat of the police car, Camille's thoughts churned like an unrelenting storm. Every whir of the engine, every shifting of the vehicle, echoed the injustice she was being subjected to. Memories of laughter with friends, the smell of freshly baked bread from the local bakery, and the simple freedom of walking under the open sky danced in her mind, a cruel contrast to the cold metal and harsh reality that now confined her. In that suffocating space, Camille vowed to herself that this moment of humiliation would not define her. Instead, it would become the crucible from which her resolve would be forged anew. The ride to the station was fraught with a cacophony of emotions. Anger mingled with despair, and a searing sense of injustice tainted every heartbeat. Camille recalled the stories her mother had once told her about standing up against wrongs no matter the cost, and realized that she, too, must become that beacon of strength for herself and for others. Though the notion of being reduced to a stereotype stung with the bitterness of 1,000 injustices, it also ignited a spark within her, one that refused to be quenched by the cold grip of subjugation. Back at the station, amidst a barrage of interrogations and an atmosphere thick with hostility, Camille maintained a quiet defiance. Each question posed by the officers, each word dripping with bias, only fueled the fire within her. She remembered her grandmother's wisdom: in every hardship lies the opportunity to rise, to break the chains that bind us. And so, even as the minutes ticked by under the stern glare of the investigation room, Camille's mind was already plotting a future far beyond the claustrophobic walls that sought to imprison her spirit. That afternoon, the sun seemed to set a little earlier over the city, as if mourning the loss of a moment that had been tarnished by injustice. Yet, even as the day came to an end, Camille's resolve grew stronger. The quiet walk that had transformed into an ordeal was now etched into her memory as the catalyst for change. In every cruel remark and every dismissive gesture, she recognized not only the scars of an unjust system but also an opportunity to be a changemaker. It was in the depths of that despair that the true essence of Camille Hayes, resilient, compassionate, and unyieldingly courageous, began to emerge. As night draped the sky with a blanket of stars, Camille found solace not in silence, but in the determination that had taken root in her soul. In the solitude of her confinement, she penned down her thoughts, a cathartic release that would later serve as both testimony and rallying cry for countless others who suffered similarly. Every written word was a promise to the community that she belonged to, a promise that the battle against systemic prejudice would be waged not with violence, but with the indomitable strength of truth and the unwavering light of hope. Even in the face of such adversity, Camille began to craft a vision, one where every individual, regardless of their skin color or background, would possess the freedom to walk their own path without the heavy burden of suspicion. The arrest that sought to diminish her spirit instead became the ignition point for a transformative journey, one where pain would be transmuted into determination, and every setback into a step forward. In the soft whisper of the wind outside, Camille could almost hear the murmurs of a liberated future, a future where the voices of the oppressed would rise in unison to reclaim their dignity and assert their identity. Her experience, though brutal, was not without purpose. It was a rude awakening to the persistent remnants of prejudice that still haunted even the most progressive corners of society. And in that awakening, Camille embraced an unswerving commitment to dismantle the forces of injustice that had dared to defy her right to simply be. As the stars glistened above, reflecting the quiet resilience of a heart that refused to be subdued, Camille made a silent vow that the pain of this day would not be in vain. Her pain, her anger, and the sorrow of that unfair evening would be the foundation upon which she would build a movement that would insist on accountability, demand change, and celebrate every individual's inherent right to freedom and dignity. This was not just a moment of personal defeat, it was the birth of a legacy that promised to echo far beyond the confines of that one fateful afternoon. In the aftermath of that painful day, as she prepared herself for the long journey ahead, Camille understood that even in the darkest moments, the light of hope could be kindled. She was determined to transform her pain into a powerful narrative, a narrative that would not only tell her story but also become a beacon for those still lost in the shadows of discrimination. And so, as the city slowly resumed its rhythm outside, Camille's heart beat a steady, resolute rhythm, a rhythm that declared, unequivocally, that injustice would no longer silence the voices of the marginalized. What do you think you would do if you experienced an injustice like Camille did? Inside the sterile walls of the interrogation room, Camille Hayes sat motionless as the harsh fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Every tick of the clock deepened the echo of injustice that had followed her since that fateful afternoon. Though still reeling from the arrest, Camille refused to let shock and despair claim her. Instead, the searing injustice fueled a burning determination to rise above it all, a determination that transformed each piercing question from the officers into a spark for revolution. The interrogation began with a barrage of accusatory remarks. An officer, his tone gruff and laced with preconceptions, demanded answers that no one in Camille's situation should ever have to give. With calm yet unwavering conviction, Camille met each question with measured silence and the occasional, firm retort. Her eyes, though weighed down by exhaustion, burned with an inner light, a defiant acknowledgement that she was more than a stereotype, more than the image of a rebellious figure caught in the crosshairs of prejudice. Every word the interrogator spoke further solidified her resolve. They were not just sentences, but stark reminders of a systemic bias that could only be overcome by courage and action. In that oppressive space, Camille's mind wandered back to the voices of her ancestors, of those who had fought tirelessly against the tides of oppression. The recollection of their resilience stirred within her a fierce determination. If the injustice of the present was to cast its shadow, then she would be the one to challenge it, to turn the bitter taste of discrimination into a potent force for change. The realization that her experience was not isolated, but shared by a multitude of marginalized individuals, was both a curse and a call to arms. It meant that her personal suffering could fuel a larger, more powerful movement, a unified stand against the forces that sought to diminish the dignity of the oppressed. Even as the hours passed and the heavy air of the room grew denser with unspoken accusations, Camille began to plan. She realized that every detail of her encounter could later become a lesson, a testimony to the cruelty of prejudice and the indomitable human spirit. In her thoughts, she started to reconstruct the events of that day, mentally cataloging every nuance, the piercing look of suspicion in the officer's eyes, the abrupt grip that had silenced her gentle pace, and the palpable tension that had vibrated in the air like a warning. Each memory was a brushstroke painting a larger picture of systemic injustice, a picture that she vowed would be used to expose and combat the deep-seated biases of those in power. Unable to contain herself in that confined space, Camille's internal resistance began to manifest in subtle yet profound ways. In brief moments of solitude between questions, she clenched her fists, closed her eyes, and recited quiet affirmations. "I am more than what they see," she whispered. "I am the embodiment of resilience, a warrior against injustice." These affirmations became her silent mantra, a defiant reminder that while the room was filled with representatives of an oppressive system, her spirit remained unchained, untouchable by the shallow judgments that sought to define her. Outside the interrogation room, the world was slowly beginning to stir with whispers of Camille's arrest. The community that had once admired her calm and dignified presence now began to rally around her, fueled by a mix of outrage and hope. Activists, legal experts, and local community leaders started to converge, determined to bring light to the dark corners of systemic racism. Social media platforms buzzed with the hashtag #StandWithCamille, as individuals from all walks of life shared their own stories of marginalization and started to question the legitimacy of a system that could reduce a human being to a mere statistic of prejudice. In the midst of the storm of public attention, Camille's spirit surged with a renewed sense of purpose. Her ordeal was now entwined with the struggles of many who had long endured the weight of discrimination. While the interrogators sought to diminish her narrative through biased questioning, the community's collective voice grew louder, proving that injustice could be met with unwavering solidarity. Camille began to see herself not only as an individual fighting for personal dignity, but as a representative of an entire movement, an emblem of resistance that demanded accountability and change. Late that evening, after hours of relentless questioning, Camille was finally allowed a brief respite in a small holding cell. The cell was bare, illuminated only by the dim glow of a solitary lamp, yet it provided the solitude needed for her thoughts to coalesce into a plan. Clutching a small notebook and a pen, she began to jot down everything, the names of the officers involved, fragments of overheard conversations, and even the sensations. Each detail would serve as ammunition in her future battle against injustice. Every scribbled note was a vow, a promise to herself and to those who had been unjustly oppressed, that their stories would not be forgotten, and their struggles would not end in silence. Camille's reflections were interspersed with memories of her mother, who had once told her, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." In that small cell, those words echoed like a beacon of hope. Camille's heart pounded with a mix of resolve and sorrow, each beat a counterpoint to the systemic discrimination that had suddenly become her reality. But it was precisely in that bitter confrontation with injustice that her strength blossomed. She resolved that every moment of humiliation, every whispered bias, would be transformed into a rallying cry, a call to arms for those who had long been silenced by fear. When the time finally came for Camille to be escorted back for further proceedings, a flicker of determination shone in her eyes. The journey back to the station was no longer viewed as a descent into despair, but as a step along a path toward liberation. Each transfer, each handshake with an indifferent officer, was a reminder of the very injustice she was determined to dismantle. Within her, a strategy was quietly taking shape, a plan to harness the power of her narrative and the solidarity of the community to challenge the entrenched systems of bias. Even as the cold metal of her restraints bit into her skin, Camille's resolve remained untarnished, a testament to the indomitable will that had been forged in the crucible of discrimination. Once back in the interrogation room for further questioning, the atmosphere subtly shifted. Camille, though still under the shadow of institutional cruelty, began to engage more directly. Her questions became incisive, her tone laced with both vulnerability and strength. She inquired about procedures, rights, and the very foundation of the accusations leveled against her. Each question was a beacon of her intellectual resilience, an effort to reclaim her narrative from those who wished to define her solely by her skin color. Her voice, unwavering and clear, began to resonate in that cold room, challenging the prejudice that lingered in every corner. Word of her defiant stand soon reached sympathetic ears among those in the corridors of power outside the immediate realm of prejudice. A few well-respected civil rights advocates, who had been following similar cases, expressed their intention to scrutinize every aspect of Camille's arrest. They saw in her not just another victim, but the embodiment of a broader social struggle, a mirror reflecting the pain, anger, and fierce courage of countless individuals who had been denied justice. Collaboration started to form behind the scenes, legal experts, community organizers, and independent journalists, all gathering to support Camille by documenting every misstep in the handling of her case. The seeds of a larger movement were being sown, and with each day, the call for reform grew louder. As Camille navigated the complexities of the legal system, her inner strength radiated outward, igniting discussions in community halls, local cafes, and even online forums. Friends and strangers alike began to share their own experiences with injustice, weaving a tapestry of resilience that spanned beyond geographic and cultural boundaries. The discussions were raw and candid, testimonies of moments when the hand of systemic bias had tried to break their spirits, only for them to rise again, more determined than ever. Camille became a symbol, a rallying point around which these disparate voices coalesced into a formidable force. It wasn't just about one woman's struggle, it was about the collective fight for dignity and equality. During one particularly poignant evening, a group of community members organized an impromptu vigil outside the police station. Huddled together under a crescent moon, the diverse assembly lit candles in silent tribute to those who had suffered at the hands of injustice. In the midst of this heartfelt assembly, Camille received news that fueled her determination further. Her brief detention and biased treatment were now under investigation by a local oversight committee. The gesture, though small, affirmed that the battle against systemic prejudice was not fought in isolation. It was a communal effort, a shared commitment to ensure that justice was not merely a lofty ideal but a tangible reality accessible to all. Within the span of those grueling hours in the interrogation room and holding cell, Camille Hayes had undergone a profound transformation. The humiliation and pain she suffered were no longer perceived solely as personal afflictions, they became the catalyst for a broader awakening. Every moment of disenfranchisement had crystallized into a single, electrifying conviction, that true change required fearless confrontation of the injustices that had long been ignored. As she prepared to face the next stages of her ordeal, Camille knew that her fight was just beginning. The spark ignited in that cold, unyielding room would soon spread, lighting the way for others to stand up and demand the dignity they rightfully deserved. In that crucible of adversity, Camille embraced her identity, not as a victim defined by prejudice, but as a resilient warrior unafraid to challenge injustice. The story of her painful detention was already evolving into a narrative of inspiration, one that would soon rally countless others who had been silenced, oppressed, or dismissed by the very systems that claimed to protect them. Each detail, each anguished yet defiant look, became a chapter in what promised to be a landmark struggle for human rights and systemic reform. As the formal proceedings continued, Camille's inner dialogue grew louder than the voices of those who sought to diminish her. She envisioned a future where every wrongful arrest, every act of bias, would be met with an unwavering community of support. She saw herself not just fighting her own battle, but standing at the forefront of a movement that demanded accountability, transparency, and above all, respect for human dignity. With each step through that labyrinth of injustice, she was planting seeds of hope that would, in time, grow into a mighty tree under which countless individuals could find shelter and solidarity. The relentless spirit of Camille Hayes was now a beacon that illuminated the deepest corners of systemic corruption. In sharing her story, she resolved to reveal not only the dark underbelly of institutional bias but also the extraordinary resilience found within those who dare to confront it head-on. The path she trod was fraught with challenges, but it was also rich with the promise of transformation, a promise that every act of discrimination would be met with an even greater act of defiance. Her journey was proof that the human spirit, when united by a common cause, possessed the power to rewrite narratives and reshape society for the better. As the night wore on and Camille prepared for the inevitable challenges of another day in a battle that was as much about personal pride as it was about societal change, she allowed herself a moment of introspection. In the quiet between the beats of an anxious heart, she found solace in the realization that the road to justice was paved by those brave enough to speak out against tyranny. The weight of injustice had become a mantle of responsibility, a call to transform personal trials into collective triumphs. And so, as dawn hinted at the promise of a new day, Camille Hayes silently vowed that her journey, marked by the scars of prejudice, would eventually become the cornerstone of a revolution rooted in truth, courage, and relentless hope. What would you do if you found yourself in Camille's shoes, fighting against such blatant injustice? The days following Camille's ordeal blurred into a relentless continuum of introspection, mobilization, and the raw, transformative energy of a soul determined to rise. With every memory of that fateful arrest etched in her heart, Camille began to notice subtle shifts around her, a stirring of the community, whispers of change in quiet cafes, and determined glances shared among those who refused to be defeated by systemic bias. It was as if the pain had unlocked a reservoir of resilience within her, transmuting every tear into a wellspring of resolute hope. In the weeks that followed, Camille's transformation was palpable. No longer was she defined solely by the injustice inflicted upon her, rather, she emerged as a beacon of empowerment. The narrative she had once been forced into was rewritten with every act of defiance and every conversation sparked by her testimony. Rather than retreating into isolation, Camille began to embrace the public sphere, recognizing that her story was not merely a chronicle of personal suffering but a clarion call for societal reform. Her once silenced voice now resonated with a strength bolstered by countless stories of shared hardship and unyielding perseverance. Camille's journey of self-rediscovery led her to active participation in community forums and town hall meetings. In these vibrant spaces, she not only recounted her experience with candor but also invited others to share the pain and hope that coexisted within their lives. Through these gatherings, what began as a solitary battle morphed into a collective movement. People from every corner of the city, each with their own scars and aspirations, found unity under the banner of change. With her empathetic spirit and innate ability to connect, Camille became the living embodiment of resistance, a living testament to the idea that individual transformation can catalyze communal healing. Beyond these meetings, Camille dedicated countless hours to writing and speaking engagements. In her carefully crafted articles and impassioned speeches, she recounted the brutality of prejudice not to relive the trauma but to illuminate the path forward. Each word she wrote was imbued with the knowledge that acknowledging past wounds was essential to fostering future growth. Camille's writings captured the delicate balance between despair and hope. They served as both an elegy for the damaged remnants of an unjust past and an anthem for the new, inclusive future she envisioned. In every line, she invited others to embrace their own journeys of transformation, urging them to see beyond the darkness into the realm of possibility. Her personal metamorphosis did not occur in isolation. Alongside her, an array of community leaders, human rights activists, and legal experts began to mobilize, fortifying the scaffolding of a nascent movement. They pooled resources, organized peaceful protests, and engaged in strategic dialogue with policymakers. News of these grassroots initiatives spread like wildfire. Stories of individual triumphs in the face of oppression inspired local media, and soon, a larger narrative began to emerge, a story that spotlighted the bravery of those who dared to stand up against a deeply flawed system. In one particularly defining moment, Camille stood on the steps of a community center during a peaceful rally, addressing a crowd that spanned generations and backgrounds. The sky above seemed to mirror the emotion swelling in the hearts of those gathered, an endless canvas waiting for the strokes of hope and change. With a steady voice that commanded both respect and compassion, she recounted the scene of her arrest, every vivid detail serving as a powerful indictment of systemic bias. Yet, as she spoke, she wove her narrative seamlessly into a message of transformation. Each injustice, she declared, is not an endpoint but a spark that can ignite a revolution of empathy and change. In that moment, the crowd did not simply listen, they felt the resonance of her words deep within their souls, a collective heartbeat merging with the rhythm of progress. Camille's transformation was as much an internal process as it was a public act. Every day, she navigated the lingering shadows of her trauma with newfound resolve. The painful echoes of her past were gradually replaced with an unwavering commitment to educate others on the importance of empathy, justice, and resilience. In intimate conversations, over cups of coffee or during quiet walks through the neighborhood where she had once faced prejudice, Camille listened attentively to stories of hardship shared by strangers. With each account, her determination deepened. She recognized that every life touched by injustice was a thread in the tapestry of a much larger narrative, a narrative that, when woven together, could reshape the social fabric of the community. Art, too, became an unexpected and profound outlet for Camille's healing. She collaborated with local artists, muralists, and musicians, channeling her pain and hope into creative expressions that adorned the city's walls and streets. One such mural depicted a phoenix rising from a bed of ashes, its wings unfurling against a backdrop of turbulent skies. To Camille, the image was a vivid metaphor for her own journey, from the desolation of a biased arrest to the soaring flight of liberation and unity. The artwork, and others like it, transformed public spaces into canvases of remembrance and promise, each stroke of paint echoing the sentiment that beauty can arise even from the deepest scars. In parallel, Camille pursued restorative practices that nurtured her inner spirit. She spent quiet mornings in meditation at local parks, sometimes joined by community members seeking solace and strength. These serene moments in nature, a gentle breeze, the soft chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves, allowed her to reconcile her inner turmoil with the hope that had grown within. With each meditative session, the sharp edges of her experience began to soften, replaced by a calming certainty that change, no matter how arduous the journey, was both possible and within reach. The ripple effect of Camille's transformation was far-reaching. Schools invited her to share her insights on civil rights and social justice, enriching the minds of young people who were the future architects of society. Universities and local libraries hosted forums where her story was analyzed, debated, and celebrated as a crucial case study in the ongoing battle against discrimination. Her narrative spurred a newfound interest in community activism, encouraging youth and adults alike to organize initiatives that addressed the roots of inequality. Every conversation sparked by her testimony was a small yet potent defiance against the normalization of prejudice, a reaffirmation that unity in the face of adversity could indeed spark a brighter future. As Camille's influence grew, so too did her commitment to systemic reform. Collaborating with dedicated legal professionals and advocacy groups, she helped draft proposals aimed at overhauling unjust practices within the law enforcement system. These proposals were not merely theoretical, they were the product of real experiences and a heartfelt understanding of what it meant to live under the constant threat of being misjudged. Camille's voice, enriched by both vulnerability and unwavering conviction, resonated in legislative halls as she articulated the need for accountability, fairness, and above all, humanity in the enforcement of the law. With each passing day, Camille embraced her role not just as a survivor of injustice but as a catalyst for transformation. She had learned that every act of resilience, no matter how minute, had the power to inspire monumental shifts in perspective and policy. The oppressive weight of her past had transfigured into a luminous guidepost pointing toward a future where justice was not a privilege for a few but a right for all. Camille's journey was no longer simply a tale of suffering, but a vibrant chronicle of the human spirit's capacity to overcome, to rebuild, and to light up the darkest corners of society with hope. In the culmination of this transformative period, Camille organized an expansive Day of Renewal, a community festival aimed at celebrating both the pain endured and the hope that had since emerged. The event was a vibrant mosaic of speeches, art displays, interactive workshops, and musical performances, all echoing the central theme that through unity and proactive engagement, even the most formidable injustices could be reimagined into stories of triumph. As the sun set on that unforgettable day, the community stood united, eyes lifted to a horizon glowing with promise, each individual a testament to the enduring light that had been kindled by Camille's transformation. What does transformation mean to you, and how can we together keep the spark of hope alive in the face of adversity? In the aftermath of a turbulent period marked by pain, defiance, and hopeful transformation, Camille Hayes emerged as a figure not simply defined by the injustice she once endured but as a beacon of possibility for a society striving for change. The final act of her journey was not merely a conclusion but an ongoing, living testament to the power of resilience and unity. Over time, the struggles that had once isolated her gave way to moments of shared healing and collective action, a grand tapestry woven from the threads of personal battles and communal triumphs. As the initial shock and bitterness of her wrongful arrest slowly receded into memory, the community that had rallied around Camille continued to grow stronger and more organized. Neighbors, activists, legal advocates, and community leaders united to form coalitions that spanned far beyond the confines of any one neighborhood or incident. Their goal was clear: to reshape the system that had once threatened to diminish the human spirit. Public forums turned into vibrant debates, city councils invited experts to propose reformative measures, and grassroots organizations demanded that the lessons learned from Camille's case serve as catalysts for lasting institutional change. At the heart of this surge toward a brighter future was Camille's unwavering commitment to justice and empathy. No longer confined by the walls of a detention cell or the stifling interrogation rooms of the past, she began to view every obstacle as an opportunity to chart a new course. Every setback was met with determination, every harsh word, with thoughtful reflection. She realized that the path to liberation lay not in reactive anger but in a steadfast dedication to transforming darkness into light. One particularly memorable chapter unfolded as Camille spearheaded the establishment of a new community center, a space designed to host dialogues, workshops, and art installations dedicated to promoting equality and healing. In a repurposed building that once symbolized bureaucratic indifference, the center buzzed with the energy of shared purpose. The walls were adorned with murals crafted by local artists. Vibrant, sweeping images depicted the journey from despair to hope, each brushstroke echoing the struggles and dreams of countless individuals. Camille's personal narrative was interlaced with testimonials from others who had encountered systemic bias, their stories converging into a collective voice that could not be ignored. Within the center's safe confines, educational programs were launched to empower individuals with the tools for civic engagement. Legal literacy workshops demystified the rights of citizens, while support groups offered solace to those scarred by encounters with discrimination. Camille dedicated countless hours to mentorship, personally guiding younger advocates and emerging leaders on how to navigate the turbulent waters of social change with grace and resolve. She fostered an environment where every story, no matter how painful, became a foundation for growth and learning. In these hallowed halls, the center transformed into a living symbol of renewal, a sanctuary where the seeds of reform took root and flourished. As the community center's influence grew, so too did the ripple effects of Camille's tireless work in other spheres of public life. Her insights were sought after at town meetings, legislative hearings, and national symposiums on civil rights. Local media no longer focused solely on the day she was unjustly detained but celebrated the long arc of her relentless pursuit of equity. Feature stories and documentaries captured the evolution of her story, painting a picture of a woman who had not only healed from her trauma but had in turn healed a fractured community. The narrative of Camille Hayes became interwoven with the broader struggle for human dignity, reminding everyone that every act of courage, no matter how seemingly small, could drive forward meaningful reform. On a warm summer evening marked by the vibrant hues of a setting sun, the community organized a grand celebration aptly named the Day of Unbound Hope. This event was not just a festivity but a symbolic reclamation of a society's rights to walk unburdened by prejudice and fear. People from every walk of life gathered in a sprawling park, where music, poetry, and art blended into an atmosphere of joyful defiance. Stalls lined with resources on legal rights and community activism provided practical support, while speakers of all ages took to the stage to share insights born out of personal struggle. Camille, now a revered spokesperson for justice, delivered a speech that resonated with a fervor born from years of hardship transformed into determination. She recounted the journey from that fateful, heartbreaking arrest to the transformative moments when hope took shape in every corner of her city. "We have learned that the darkness of prejudice can be dispelled by the light we shine together," she declared, her voice steady and inspiring. The words reverberated beneath the open sky, igniting applause and sparking an outpouring of renewed commitment from every listener. In that moment, the celebration was both a tribute to past battles and a promise to secure a future free from systemic injustice. The legislative landscape was also experiencing a shift, as Camille's advocacy had sparked wider discussions on accountability in law enforcement practices. A coalition of reform-minded policymakers and community representatives began drafting policies intended to safeguard citizens against discriminatory practices. Workshops and public hearings allowed residents to provide input on policies meant to enhance transparency and fairness. Camille's testimony, backed by the undeniable evidence of a community unified by shared experience, became an influential part of these reform discussions. While the process was long and fraught with inevitable setbacks, every small victory, be it a change in protocol or the resignation of a discredited official, was celebrated as a milestone on the road to true justice. Yet, even as tangible reforms began taking shape, the emotional and personal dimensions of the struggle continued to loom large. Camille grappled with memories that often surfaced like ghosts in quiet moments, echoes of a time when a simple walk in the park had turned into a battle against an unjust world. However, these memories no longer held the power to paralyze her. Instead, they served as an ever-present reminder of why the fight had to go on. She maintained a delicate balance between honoring her past and embracing the future, an ongoing dialogue between healing and vigilance. In private moments, she would sometimes sit in the garden of the community center, watching as children played and listened to the gentle rustle of leaves, finding solace in the assurance that every new life promised progress and renewal. As the seasons changed, so did the contours of the community's struggle. The momentum generated by Camille's story wove itself into the cultural fabric of the city. Schools incorporated curricula that not only celebrated diversity but also engaged students in critical discussions about discrimination and empathy. Local artists, inspired by the rawness of her narrative, produced works that challenged societal norms and invited viewers to reflect on the cost of prejudice and the beauty of diversity. Through art, literature, and public discourse, the narrative of Camille Hayes and her community evolved into a movement that transcended the borders of any one neighborhood. It became a rallying cry for justice across cities and states, inspiring other communities to confront their own shadows and step into the light of accountability and hope. In this final chapter of Camille's journey, the transformation was complete. What had once begun as a series of painful events had blossomed into a testament to human perseverance. She had managed to turn the painful legacy of systemic oppression into an enduring legacy of reform and resilience. Her story, a tapestry rich with sorrow, defiance, and ultimate redemption, reminded everyone that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit can triumph. In her eyes shone not only the memories of past struggles but also the promise of a future shaped by the collective will of people refusing to bow before injustice. The journey that began with a wrongful arrest on a quiet afternoon now concluded in an outpouring of collective hope, a community, a system, and a society determined to learn from its missteps and commit to a path toward lasting change. Camille Hayes' transformation was the bridge that connected individual pain with the universal pursuit of equality, illuminating the idea that every setback can be reimagined as a stepping stone towards a brighter, more inclusive future. How do you envision your role in shaping a future where justice, empathy, and unity guide us all? As our story comes to a close, let this moment serve as a gentle reminder that even in the wake of adversity, there is an undeniable power in unity, compassion, and love. Every step we take together, whether marked by hardship or illuminated by small acts of kindness, helps weave a tapestry of hope that binds us all. Like the resilient heart of Camille Hayes, each of us has the strength to transform pain into purpose and suffering into a powerful force for change. In reflecting on Camille's journey, we see that her struggle was not in vain. It was a call to awaken our collective conscience, a plea to stand up for justice and respect, and a tender invitation for us to embrace one another with empathy and warmth. Just as a single ray of sunlight pierces through the darkest clouds, our shared stories and sincere connections can dismantle even the most stubborn shadows of prejudice. Now, more than ever, we must remember that the real transformation begins with each one of us. It is through honest conversations, acts of kindness, and the relentless pursuit of fairness that we can create a future where every individual is celebrated for who they truly are. Let your heart be your guide and your actions be a testament to the love and compassion that dwell within you. Trust in your ability to make a difference, and know that together, we can build bridges of understanding that span across differences and heal deep-seated wounds. In these challenging times, self-love and collective care are not just aspirations, they are imperatives. Every kind gesture, every word of encouragement, and every act of solidarity carries the power to change lives. Remember that you are never alone in your struggles. Your hope, your resilience, and your capacity to love form an unbreakable bond with those on a similar path. Like a warm embrace in a cold world, let us hold each other up and march forward with courage and determination. As you reflect on this message, consider the ways you can share your light with others. What small action can you take today to spread kindness, challenge injustice, or simply be there for a friend in need? Our collective future is shaped by these thoughtful moments, each one a seed planted in the fertile ground of human connection. Thank you for embarking on this journey with us and for opening your heart to the lessons and hope woven throughout Camille's story. Your presence here is a beacon of love in itself, lighting up the path for many more who seek a fairer, kinder world. May you carry this message of hope and compassion with you, inspiring those around you to embrace life with open hearts and unwavering determination. If you found this story and its message of love and unity inspiring, please remember to subscribe to our channel. Your support not only helps us continue sharing these important stories but also builds a community where every voice is heard and every heart is valued. Stay hopeful, keep loving, and always move forward.